Hey everyone, Pulse Check is finally back after a longer than expected mid-season break. To be honest, life hit me pretty hard and it took me a minute to get back into the swing of things. But hey, we're here. Now, while editing this week's episode, it did feel a little bit like we're bashing our culture, and I just want to remind you that that is definitely not the goal. While there's so many things to value and celebrate and appreciate about our culture, and hopefully this series is a good reminder of that, I also wanted to use this project as an opportunity to challenge the things that we need to. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And be sure to follow us on Instagram, where I'll be sharing more behind the scenes of bringing this project to life and sharing some reflections I've had recently. As a side note, for those of you in Sydney, I am really excited to have Pulse Check showcased at Parramatta Council's Diwali Festival on November 24th. Come check it out. More info on that at the end of the episode. Enjoy. What needs to change about our culture?
Truthfully, I gained a little bit of weight and all of a sudden everyone is noticing that. The first thing aunties and uncles will say to me, you've gotten fatter or you've gained weight, complimenting you based on like a physical appearance, saying you're dark, saying you're fair. I hate hearing that as the first thing.
There are a lot of rituals that we are carrying on even without understanding the significance or the relevance of it. We are too nosy as well. That needs to change.
Being more open and talking about developmental delays and disabilities in children.
That there's only one way to do things. My parents and a lot of my relatives have grown up with a frame of mind where there's particular steps that you need to follow that may have worked for where and how they grew up, but may not apply so much to my personal life.
Restrictions for people to be who they want to be. Personal example, pole dancing is something that I do on the side. When I publish videos about that, I get a lot of backlash saying it doesn't abide by our culture.
I think the big issue is like the caste system stuff, right? We come to other countries and we see racism and stuff and we face it and we're like, this is so bad. But then back home, we're doing the same thing to each other. That's been there institutionally for generations, and maybe in the next few decades we can get rid of all the architecture around that kind of internal hate.
We have religions such as Hinduism that celebrate Shakti, female energy and feminine divinity and female power. But when you look at that side by side with the way we treat women in society, there's such a contradiction there. The way that there was an issue of female infanticide for so long, the fact that women still struggle to find safety and security and confidence in just being able to live side by side with their counterparts is a big challenge.
More willingness to learn about each other. Sometimes Punjabis stick with the Punjabis, the Tamil people stick with the Tamil people. To break down the north-south divide would be good a little bit more.
The openness of talking about mental health and brown culture, that's something that needs to change.
Social status based on things that are quite superficial tend to be something that we're holding on to, which I don't think really serve us.
What I think we need to reclaim is our great love for the plurality of our society, which I think is the actual nature of South Asian culture, is that it is so diverse and actually at its heart inclusive, and we've lost that.
The men in the DMs, what are you doing? You gotta be better than that.
Gossip. It's what's our downfall. That's not necessary. You've got something good to say it to them. Don't make your happiness or your day on somebody else's tears or somebody else's ill fortune.
Belief in superstitions and how we base our life sometimes on those superstitions.
There needs to be more open-mindedness, and we need to actually start listening to each other beyond surface level.
I think it's time for us to own who we are with pride, but also bring it to the lens that we're around. Don't be stuck in the past and play these kind of narratives that are a bit limiting.
The judgment we often put on people and the expectations that come with that.
The egos need to go, and a lot of the prejudices that we still hold.
Having that self-doubt and worrying about what other people think.
While it is well-founded, pressure of expectation.
Problems related to caste system, that just needs to go. It's colorism.
The concept of it's not nice to talk about needs to change from a mindset of shame to a mindset of being open and transparent.
Some of the backward thinking in terms of how some adults still look at young women these days, they just think that we should just study and then get married and then our lives should just be looking after kids. That needs to break, and I hope that like our generation can be the change for that.
We need to empower our kids a bit more to question and not always listen to the elders. I know I'm going to get so much of slack for it.
As a community, we are both very cohesive and very comforting to each other, but we can also be very suffocating and claustrophobic.
Especially in a very white dominant culture, we are easily swayed to just fit the norm and not rep who we are and carry it forward. It's something that I think we should change within the community and understand the real meaning behind things and not in a surface level.
Mentalities around mental health, around illness and differences in people, because people tend to want to hide it or shame it.
How people comment on other people's bodies and how people ask questions like when someone's going to get married or have a baby, things like that. Patriarchal values that are inherent sometimes in our familial structures and in our cultural structures.
There's a fair amount of sexism within our culture that I've experienced as a Sri Lankan woman. I wish we could see a little bit more equality throughout that.
Talking behind people's back, which I think is quite prevalent in our community.
Comparing or competition from a very young age.
I think what needs to change in our culture is not caring what other people think. If we let go of that, we can solve a lot of the issues in our homes and start a conversation and respect each other a little bit more.
People who live in a hybrid culture where there is a clash of cultures, I think we can do better at integrating the two. They don't actually need to be two separate things. They can actually blend together. And I know that's challenging, but I think that's something that we can do better.
Our community needs to love all of us in the community for who we are. Secular India is an example of that, but we don't always live it.
Some of the conservatism, some of the expectation, some of the assumptions that we carried over from historical and often unchallenged views in society.
We need to get back to our original roots. I think unfortunately the history of South Asia in the immediate past has been tinged with colonialism, and offshoots of that have adulterated and mixed up the messaging and the values system. I think if we get back to where things were and the way that they should have been or could have been, I think the culture could be even that much more amazing.
Because it's a very fear-based society and very risk-averse, we tend to focus on what we don't have. And when we focus on what we don't have, that creates that scarcity mindset. I think the whole society would change dramatically if they focused on just the little things they have. I think they tend to overlook it and focus on the big things like what society has told us to value.
People don't feel bad about telling you what they really feel. No filter. You may get unwarranted advice or opinions. Think before you speak would be great.
The expectations from the older generation on the younger kids when it comes to what the right pathway is. Nowadays, the landscape has changed so much and there's so many options. Parents should allow their kids to pursue their passions, whatever that might be.
I see a lot of people having a passion they're really good at, that they love, but they don't follow through with it because they just do what their parents like, what society tells them to do, moving through the timeline, doing what everyone else is doing, comparing themselves to others. We have one life. If you're not going to pursue what you love doing, what is the point?
So this is biased because I'm in the wedding industry. A lot of the dramas come from family. Family's expectations of how they'd feel if their family and friends saw that this was their wedding. So let's just say there was a couple wanting to have a 5-person wedding, but the family's like, we can't have a 5-person wedding. We have to invite these people because what would they think about us? Do they think that we're not from a good family? Do they think that we don't have enough money? It's never about who are the people that mean the most to me. I will only care about their feelings.
Misinterpretation of what the heritage stands for and the undue pressure that we put on the community, often based on baseless beliefs.
I think we need to be a bit more open-minded. People need to be more accepting to how they view the world, that it's okay for people to have different opinions and still get along and be okay and happy together.
The way in which we draw boundaries between people and who counts and who doesn't count, including caste, including the way we treat outsiders. That can be said for any group, but we have that as well.
We've been around for a long time, so I think there's some things that started out as one idea, changed, and then now we're trying to relearn it or revert.
As the oldest daughter in a brown family, I love my independence, I love my autonomy. I understand a lot of these things are very Western concepts. I've wanted to escape community when I was a kid so many times because I didn't have my own sense of self. So I think having a sense of community that allows people to exist as they are rather than pressure to get married or pressure to be doctors or lawyers or engineers. I really want community to exist as a safe space rather than something we run from.
There's two streams. Some people really love it and they live it day to day. Others forget about it. They just come here and then they put on a big accent and they lost their culture.
People just need to be proud. Be proud of where you're from and who you are. Rep it wherever you are.
Parents should teach our culture. Our culture is very rich. The new generation should know about it.
To not lose our culture and to maintain it. There is a younger generation coming through that can lose a little bit of that identity, but at the end of the day, it's still part of who we are.
Holding on to the traditions that are important, but also modernized. The changes are happening slowly, but it would be nice if they happened faster.
Whether it's talking about mental health, body image, relationships, it's understandable that older generations are still playing catch up, but if you're going to migrate here, you need to understand that the younger generations are going to live and breathe some of the values that they learn here and then combine that with tradition and culture as well.
Living in a country like this gives us an opportunity to work things which are outside our boundaries. boundaries of what we traditionally do. We need to open up to better ideas.
There's so much more than just surface level. If everyone was to give actually being themselves and not being afraid to be our parents a shot, you'd understand how wonderful it is to actually be South Asian.
We have to be more open, inclusive, and we have to embrace humanity without having any divisions, any differences.
I think what needs to change about South Asian culture is the way that the world perceives us. We're the best, and a lot of people aren't as educated with South Asian stories and the culture and the background of where we come from, and that's really important to understanding us and what makes us awesome, and I really hope people appreciate us a lot more because we're so underappreciated.
Thanks for watching another episode of Polcheck. It is really good to be back. If you're new to us, make sure you subscribe and check out our previous episodes as well. Again, this episode is not about finding fault with our culture, but more about checking in and seeing where different people feel like we could be doing better. Let me know your thoughts down below. As I mentioned at the start of the episode, I am super excited to have Polcheck showcased at Parramatta Council's Diwali Festival on the 24th of November. You can find details to that down below. I'm also super excited to be emceeing Intention Studios' annual showcase on the 29th of November. They're bringing together some incredible dancers, musicians, and artists to showcase some of the incredible South Asian talent we have here in Sydney. Get your tickets below. For both events, you'll see some familiar faces from this series, so come, show them love, and see them do what they do best. Join us in 2 weeks' time for our next episode, where I'll be asking the panel what it means to be Australian. See you then.